Hello and welcome to another edition of Bangladesh Today. I am Smita Prakash. There's no sign of any change in the political deadlock between the two warring political parties, though back channels are reportedly working to get the BNP to participate in the January elections. However, a strike called by the BNP and its Islamist allies has paralyzed normal life. Rail lines were damaged at many places and scores of vehicles were torched by the protesters to oppose the announcement of parliamentary elections in the country. The protests began after the Election Commission announced that polls will be held on January 5th. There are reports that the vote might be postponed to ensure participation of the opposition parties. The 71-hour-long nationwide strike by Khaleda Zia-led BNP and allies paralyzed business, education and health facilities across the country. Over a dozen people were killed in violence and over 250 injured in 3 days. Vehicles were set ablaze by supporters of BNP as they clashed with the police. The BNP Jamaat activists blocked several crucial roads like the Dhaka-Chittagong, Dhaka-Sylhet, Dhaka-Aricha, Dhaka-Rangpur, Barisal Dhaka, Satkhira Khulna, Kishorganj Bhairab, Panchagarh Dinajpur highways. Protesters attacked the Election Commission offices in Bogra, damaging furniture, documents and voter lists of electoral ID cards. Opposition activists also damaged railway tracks by burning signal systems in Brahmanbaria and Maiman Singh, which disrupted train services on several routes.
আবার হরতাল সমর্থিত লোকজন রেলের নাশকতার উদ্দেশ্যে আসে একত্রিত হয় এবং ট্রেন চলাচলে বাধা সৃষ্টি করে। আমরা তাৎক্ষণিকভাবে পুলিশি পদক্ষেপ নেওয়ায়
Security has been stepped up in the capital Dhaka with police and paramilitary border guards out in force. However, blockades forced cars, buses and trucks to stop along the main roads.
এই অপরাধের কারণে আমরা গাড়ি চালাতে পারি না। গাড়ি রাস্তা বাইর করলে ভাঙচুর করে। আমাদের একটা ট্রাকের মূল্য বহুত মূল্য। এইজন্য আমরা ভয়ে আমরা গাড়ি স্ট্যান্ডে রেখে দিয়েছি।
Hundreds of people rallied in Dhaka to oppose the strike called by the BNP and its key ally, the Jamaat-e-Islami, against the announcement of the date for the country's parliamentary polls. Insisting that the strike by the opposition has failed to gain support, Awami leader Mofazil Hossain said that people in the country were actually relieved after the declaration of the polls date.
মানুষ বাংলার মানুষ স্বস্তি ফিরে পেয়েছে। খালেদা জিয়া মনে করেছেন আজকে অবরোধ দিয়ে বাংলাদেশের মানুষকে স্তব্ধ করে দেবে, তার কথা কেউ শুনে নাই। আজকে ভাই হলে তার অবরোধ হয়েছে নাকি বলেন তো?
Some people said that the strikes called to oppose the polls were unconstitutional.
বাঁচার জন্য কিছু নির্দিষ্ট কিছু নেতা এবং দল তাদের স্বার্থ উদ্ধারের জন্য যে অরাজকতা সৃষ্টি করতেছে বা হইতেছে, আমার মনে হয় যদি সুষ্ঠুভাবে নির্বাচন হয় এর থেকে জনগণ মুক্তি পাবে।
The BNP and the Jamaat-e-Islami have unleashed violent protests after the War Crimes Tribunal awarded punishment to several of their leaders for crimes committed during the 1971 Liberation War. A court also cancelled the registration of the Jamaat-e-Islami as a political party and barred it from participating in the parliamentary elections. The Islamists now pose a threat to democracy in Bangladesh and are adopting all possible means to disrupt peace in the country. The opposition BNP and its allies are not willing to contest the polls, and this is expected to fuel more violence and political instability in the country. Prevailing unrest and unabated political violence in Bangladesh is a cause of concern to the international community. The European Parliament in Brussels recently passed a resolution urging calm in the run-up to the elections in Bangladesh. The European Parliament also expressed concern over the hindrance in the daily life of the citizens due to continued general strikes called by the BNP and its ally Jamaat-e-Islami. The European Parliament called on all groups and individuals to exercise tolerance and restraint, especially in the lead-up to the elections in the country.
Well, Bangladesh is in a critical situation because in spite of the tremendous poverty and lack of development of the country, actually the last few years have been very positive. And Bangladesh has approached several of the goals of the millennium, for instance. But yet it is facing a tremendous crisis caused by the resistance of the Islamist forces to first to the plight of justice for the trials judging those who organized the genocide of 1971, and now really trying to provoke mayhem in the country. This is a very serious situation. I think that the European Parliament passed a very important resolution last week. I think it is a very balanced resolution, and a lot of good advice was passed there, and I'm very happy for the European Parliament to have take such a position.
The European Parliament claimed that the citizens of Bangladesh would be deprived of a political choice, and the country's social and economic stability and its impressive development progress would be undermined if the opposition boycotts the general elections.
Well, it's fundamental that there will be a climate of peace and tranquility, that people are allowed to freely express their vote without such pressures and such organized terror, because that's what it is that we are witnessing now in Bangladesh. That's what our mission, the Canadian mission to Bangladesh, has been reporting to us.
Bangladesh's ambassador to Belgium, Ismat Jahan, said that in spite of the troubles, Bangladesh would sustain democracy.
There would be some kind of apprehensions that's going on and speculations which might lead to some disability, some unrest, which is best avoided, because for a country like Bangladesh, which has already tested the democracy for some times now, it is very important to maintain and sustain democracy.
She condemned the violence that came up as a result of the war crimes trials in which several BNP and Jamaat leaders were sentenced. According to government estimates, during the War of Liberation in 1971, 3 million people were killed, thousands of villages were razed, and hundreds of thousands of women were raped by West Pakistani forces and Jamaat supporters.
It is more than 40 years that the people have been denied justice. So justice delayed is justice denied. So it is very important for bringing closure to the wounds, and I think a free and fair trial, which the government is heading to, is very important to bring that closure.
Former Canadian Minister David Kilgour worries about growing fundamentalism in Bangladesh and its effect to the business community. He believes that the pullout of security forces from Afghanistan, especially bordering Pakistan, will give more impetus to Islamist terror organizations to encourage violence in countries like Bangladesh, where the Jamaat is already on a rampage.
It's clear that a lot of people want to get out of Afghanistan, and the worry I have is that if everybody just says, "Oh, we're leaving," and we're going to ignore problems in places like Pakistan, it makes it easier for fundamentalism to prevail, and that I think would be an utter tragedy for the people of Bangladesh or for Afghanistan if the Al-Qaeda and the jihadists were to prevail in Bangladesh. So having been to Bangladesh as minister, I have enormous admiration for the people there. For example, the garment industry is worth about $21 billion. How many jobs does that create? How many families does that give a future to? How many better lives does that create? So it's we don't want to see people take office in Dhaka that are simply going to say, well, the economy be damned. We don't want women working, and as I'm sure you know, 80% of the people working in the garment industry are women. I've seen them. I think it's 6 million people work in the industry. So maintaining the economy is extremely important.
The BNP Jamaat combined has no plans to take part in the January elections. But worse, it's trying to sabotage the elections by creating lawlessness through strikes. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, while referring to blockades, said that the BNP was killing people just as the Pakistani forces had done in 1971. The BNP's decision not to participate in the upcoming polls poses a threat to the fragile democracy in Bangladesh. No elections would mean implementation of Clause 4 of Article 57 of the Constitution and will result in something similar to what happened in 2007 when the country was thrown into a 2-year spell of a state of emergency. However, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina affirmed that the polls would be held in time and called upon Khalida Zia to refrain from the politics of destruction. Bangladesh's independent war veteran, Major General Syed Muhammad Ibrahim, said that the leading parties represent two different ideologies and different parameters of success and failure.
In my view, it may be a little bit personal and mostly political. It is a coincidence. They represent two different political family. They represent two different political ideology and culture. They represent two different experience of childhood, family life. And they represent two different parameters of success and failure in their prime ministership.
A large number of elections have been held during the tenure of the Awami League government, in which their own candidates have been defeated. There were no allegations of rigging in those polls, so it does seem a bit odd that the BNP is so certain that the national elections will be rigged. Fear of an unfavourable verdict could be a reason for alleging rigging even before the polls. The real reason, however, why BNP does not want to participate in the elections is that the BNP Supremo, Khalida Zia, is unprepared to face the electorate. While she wasn't faring too badly between 2000 and 2012, when Sheikh Hasina's popularity was on the slide, the Awami League has got its act right and rectified several mistakes. Subsequently, its popularity has increased at the cost of the BNP. An opinion survey carried out by the Daily Pratham Olo in September 2013 found that if elections were held, then the BNP would get 50.3% of the vote and the Awami League would get 36.5%. Since its earlier poll in April, the trend was a widening gap between the two parties. However, by November, the picture had changed, and that too drastically. The nationwide survey on issues, messages and opinions of voters issued by the USAID, Democracy International and UKAID found that the difference between the two parties had narrowed down from 27% to just 3%. While 30% of the respondents felt that the BNP would win, 35% felt that the Awami League would do so. Given the trend, it's not hard to predict where the bulk of the 13% undecided voters would go. More in the next episode next week. Thank you for watching Bangladesh Today. Goodbye.